Hey YouTube, Tom Russell here from CBS21 News, and today we're starting a new initiative of sharing our historical archives with you in a series that looks at Central PA through the years. Each week we will publish at least one, maybe more, archive videos from the past to YouTube in their entirety. Now, some of the videos will be presented as is without any narration, and others, where we can, we will have information added for clarity and context. The CBS21 archives go all the way back to 1968, and they live on a wide range of formats, from film to various types of tape. And because of their age, many of these films and tapes require special attention when dubbing, which is why we are starting out slowly with releases. Eventually, we will increase the weekly number of uploads, so please make sure you comment below and hit the bell to subscribe to get notified when we do add new videos. Thank you so much for watching. This week, we have part of a long-form interview with the late Mayor of Harrisburg, Stephen Reed. It's just after his victory over former Mayor Paul Doutrick in 1982. The conversation takes place at a time when the city of Harrisburg's finances were out of control and the city was on a path towards bankruptcy. In the following video, Mayor Reed lays out his plan for healing the finances of the city and the work that would be needed to make it happen. Now, there's a lot more that can be said on this topic, but that's for another video. Here now is Stephen Reed when he took office in 1982.
It's clearly not the approach that the Reed administration is going to take. We need to have a homesteading effort where we can market our publicly owned properties, and I put emphasis on them because they are the most readily available, but it doesn't end there. I think we have to have an aggressive marketing effort. Cities should go into the real estate business. We've got plenty of vacant lots and structures, many of which can be restored, which I think should be, but they have to be marketed through a lottery approach, through homesteading, through direct sale, through turnover to private and nonprofit development corporations. You can build into your housing program the incentives of the block grant program through grants and subsidies and through the types of street and neighborhood improvements that go with the development of whole blocks. I think those kinds of things need to be packaged and need to be marketed aggressively. There has been an inability on the part of city government to carry out those kinds of functions because they don't have the technical staff on board that knows anything about them. And so things that have worked in other cities, such as Baltimore, haven't been attempted here and therefore haven't worked. We have some other issues related to that. One concern that I have is that Harrisburg has been unable to seek and to use resources available to it. Our resources are limited from the federal and state governments, more so today than at any time in the last 30 years. But we have a situation where the city of Harrisburg is eligible for mortgage subsidy money through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to the tune of $1.6 million. And yet the city of Harrisburg in 1981 failed to apply for those funds. December 31st, 1981 was the deadline for the application for those funds. We've lost those monies. We can never recoup them. How much we'll be eligible for in the future remains to be seen. Those kinds of issues and matters related to the UDAG proposal for Huckleberry Alley, the UDAG proposal for hotel and convention centers, all of those have a spin-off effect on the housing market. And I think in the bottom line is that in today's economy, particularly with today's interest rates, I'm going to find that the acquisition of an older, structurally sound city property and restoring that property is considerably less expensive than buying or building one in the suburban areas. And we are particularly, therefore, attractive to younger couples, to young professionals who are just coming into this area because of state government or whatever. We are a place that is a golden opportunity for investment purposes for both owner-occupants and investors who don't live in those properties. We intend to make sure that the housing stock that we have, which is an older housing stock, is not, in fact, our biggest problem, but rather our best resource, our best point of attraction to bring those people into the city.
Commissioner, to change your tracks for just a moment, some people thought that the campaign between you and the mayor, the outgoing mayor, was pretty rough at times. How are you and he getting along during the transition?
It could have been better. There were occasions where I thought that while the communications lines were open, that the cooperation wasn't as much as it should have been, but I think overall it's been good. We've had cooperation from different persons in the various departments of city government, and that's because the mayor directed that they should be cooperative, and so it is to those persons that we've directed most of our attention. I did request Mayor Doutrick not to make any additional hirings and any promotions, and he agreed to that, much to the chagrin of some of his advisors. We've had our moments over issues such as the city budget, particularly when it came to the issue of debt service. We have a new city hall into which city government will move approximately April or May of 1982. That city hall certainly was not built by myself or any of the people that will be coming into the Reed administration. It was built by the past administration, but they have not had to pay for it. Now we do have to pay for it since we're moving into the building. Our efforts to find the revenue in order to make those amortization payments has not met with the current administration's favor, and they threatened a veto on the special debt service tax that would be necessary to pay for the new city hall. Now, we all knew that additional revenues were going to be necessary to pay for it, and now it comes time to pay the piper, so to speak, and they want to walk away from it. Well, that's okay, but somebody's got to deal with that issue, and that somebody happens to be me.
Have you and the outgoing mayor been seeing one another regularly?
No, that hasn't really been necessary. Most of our effort has been directed to doing a thorough analysis of the different agencies of city government, both in terms of who's there and what their functions are, and what are the operations of the different agencies. So most of our time has been spent within the various agencies. And of course, the Transition Committee's major effort has been to recruit persons to the various management positions, and that really doesn't require an awful lot of contact with the current administration, so that's most where our attention is directed.
When you mentioned the tax increase that you are in favor of, is this the first of others to come?
I hope not. I really don't like any tax increases. I think most politicians would love to go into office and say that through budget slashing that we are going to reduce your taxes and thus make yourself look good. And indeed, I could go through that type of public posturing and be the fair-haired boy of every taxpayer in Harrisburg, and they obviously supported me overwhelmingly in the election, and that would be a nice way to reward that service. The problem is that if I did that, I'd be laying off police officers the following week in the process of deciding whether or not we're going to have a new city hall or have a new police department. There's no question that we have a new city hall. There's nothing I can do about that. We're stuck with it. That building is going to be paid for one way or the other, and it's starting in 1982. I have no choice in that matter, neither does anyone else.
You'll forgive me for saying that it sounds as though you're laying the groundwork for more tax increases to come.
I don't think so. Our analysis indicates that what we would like to do is establish a special debt service fund that will include a modest increase in taxes, which provides about $570,000 worth of revenue to help pay for the new city hall. And then we will use the interest earnings on the city hall bond issue itself, pull that into a special fund, put it into money market securities, and be able to help make those payments over the next 5 to 8 years, and thus eliminate that burden and eliminate that consideration and issue for all the subsequent budgets of not only my administration but the next administration. The alternative is that we simply take the interest earnings on the city hall bond issue and make this year's payment next year's payment. All that's going to do is just simply forestall the inevitable issue of how you're going to pay for City Hall. And that would turn around and cause a massive tax increase 2 years from now. So the question is, do you do it now or do you do it in 2 years? And I think a more orderly management approach to dealing with the City Hall payment issue is in order. It goes back to this whole buy now, pay later mentality that has stalled bills in city government to the point where now we're paying for things that they've been doing the last several years. Somebody's going to have to pay the bills, and that somebody has to be all of us.
Commissioner, excuse me, how serious is the city's financial problem now? We've
Very
talked
serious.
We've talked about, well, be more specific than that, if you will. Is it comparable to, say, Cleveland's? Is there a default on the horizon?
I think that if the current practices of city government were permitted to continue, where it would be uncertain as to the source of revenue to pay for the new city hall, where it would be clear that there was no control on spending in any of the departments, where non-competitive pricing policies were permitted to continue, to result in special expenditures and sweetheart contracts and so on, I think that we would be at the point where Cleveland was a number of years ago. I think that we will successfully nip that in the bud. We are going to have a difficult year, this first year of the four-year administration. And while we certainly are not where Cleveland was at, I would say that our condition is serious.
How close are we to being where Cleveland was at?
Not close. Cleveland was literally at the point of default on all of their financial obligations. The city of Harrisburg is not near a default on any of their obligations. What the city of Harrisburg has today is a stagnated tax base that is not producing any additional general fund revenues through real estate taxes. And at the same time, we're faced with the same inflationary factors that everyone else is in terms of increased salaries and increased costs of goods and commodities. And we therefore are unable to sustain the volume of personnel and activities that city government was previously doing. Now there's a certain amount of leeway there because I believe that we've had more personnel than what we've needed. I happen to believe that we've been doing some things that we shouldn't have been doing, and that there has been overspending in areas that there shouldn't have been. So I can eat up some of that increased factor for personnel and goods and commodities without substantial reductions in the basic services. But it goes back to my initial point that if we didn't deal with how we're going to pay for the new city hall, that is such a sizable chunk of money that I'd be faced with a question of how many police do you lay off? How many fire officers do you lay off in order to pay for this new building?
When you say it's going to be a tough year ahead, you're coming into office facing 4 municipal union contracts coming up.
Yes.
What can we expect from Steve Reed as a negotiator and a bargainer? Are you saying you're going to lay the line and be tough on this now?
Yes. That's putting it mildly.
How tough will you be?
The inevitable question. Well, naturally, I don't want to give out all of the secrets prior to going to the negotiating table. We're going to approach the unions with some very hard data on exactly where we are financially and make it very clear to everyone's satisfaction that large wage and benefit increases will be the direct and immediate cause of layoffs of members of their union. It's just that simple. And that's not a game, it's simple financial fact. Further, and just as important to me as the chief manager of city government, is the fact that existing contracts of 3 of the unions in the city government involve not just wage and benefit provisions, but other provisions which I believe seriously impede management's ability to direct and redirect its personnel on matters related to management prerogatives. And so we will work very hard, very aggressively, to restore management's right to manage, management's right to discipline, management's right to objectively evaluate its personnel and to weed out those who are lazy and incompetent or who otherwise don't perform.
When you talk about this, though, there are the human terms also. You mentioned you may have to have layoffs. But
there will be layoffs.
Where can we afford in Harrisburg to have layoffs of police officers or firemen? Is there a line that you can walk there?
No, there really isn't a line. I mean, I can tell you how you measure that and what's the happy medium. There is no happy medium. It's basically boiling down to one thing. What can we afford? I think that we have more personnel, for example, in the Department of Public Works than what we need, and that is where some layoffs will occur. You're going to find a reduction in city personnel in most of the agencies of city government simply through attrition. I simply won't fill vacancies. You're going to find the virtual elimination of several bureaus of city government from top to bottom. You're going to find the merger of certain agencies into larger and hopefully more cost-efficient and performance-efficient agencies. You're going to find those kinds of structural changes taking place. Correspondingly, you're going to find some new initiatives taking place as well. I don't want to paint a completely dismal picture of city government because there are some exciting and, I believe, optimistic things on the horizon. Clearly, our ability to deal with these kinds of internal, structural, and financial problems are central to whatever else we do. But just as important is that we take the initiative to do for ourselves what we know nobody else is going to do, what Washington and Capitol Hill isn't going to do in Harrisburg. And some of those things involve economic development, going out and competitively seeking business and industrial development. seeking activities in the area of tourism, promotion, and marketing. And you're going to see at the same time that there are reductions in some areas of city government and reductions in personnel, you're going to see new initiatives in areas that this city government has never, ever undertaken. And that has been to its own detriment. So while we seek to properly manage our limited resources, we want to more effectively use those limited resources to build our tax base, to make us compete with places like Philadelphia and Baltimore, who have already demonstrated to the northeastern part of the country how cities can make comebacks. Harrisburg has some catching up to do in that regard.
Commissioner, let's turn away from City Hall and the present for just a moment toward the future. A lot's been made about your future. You're a charismatic young man with whose star is on the rise. Where do you hope to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now?
5 years from now, I hope to be presiding over a city government that has stimulated and led the most remarkable resurgence of the city of Harrisburg that anyone could have believed possible. And if I'm successful in doing that, if I am able to do the things that I want to do for Harrisburg in the next 4 years, then Stephen Reed's political future will more or less take care of itself after that. There will be opportunities to move on, so to speak, to other kinds of things. But I think that if Stephen Reed's smart, he had better concentrate his time and his resources on doing a super job as mayor, because if he doesn't do a super job as mayor, there isn't going to be a political future.
What does Stephen Reed see as his political strengths at this point in his career and his political weaknesses?
I think, well, we'll deal with weaknesses first, since politicians don't usually do that. I think that in terms of weaknesses, my tendency is to get immersed into the details of what I'm doing and without delegating authority and responsibility. I have a tendency to do that, and I always have. And I'm going to have to train myself not to do that, because I'm taking on a challenge that certainly is going to require the attention of many persons, and so it should. And we'll be having a large staff, hopefully capable, and indeed I'm committed to make sure that they're capable of doing the myriad of kinds of details. So it's kind of a shifting of gears on my part, that no longer will I be just dealing with the details of things, but rather setting general policy, tone, direction, and concept. And we're in the process of doing that. So that's something I have to work on, and will continue to do so, and I'm sure my staff will assist. In terms of strengths, I think probably the best strength that I have is that I'm unencumbered. I have no one in the background, no group to which I'm responsible, no one pulling strings in the background. I was opposed by my own political party in the Democratic primary. I was actively opposed by different other groups in both the primary and the general election, including some of the unions. I have no group that can claim credit for my election. No one advanced me as the candidate. I'm not anyone's candidate. Going into office unencumbered, and having made no deals, and owing no group or any person anything is the best advantage I have going for me, because I'm free and clear to do the things that are necessary. Controversial, perhaps, and in many cases overdue.
Commissioner, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. On Monday at 11 a.m., Stephen Reed will be sworn into office in ceremonies at the Forum. For my colleague, Todd Ulrich, I'm Pat Menarson. Thank you for being with us.
A conversation with Harrisburg Mayor-elect Stephen Reed has been a News 21 special.